Metroid Samus Returns can pretty much be summed up in the title alone. Samus Returns. Fans have been clamoring for a new 2D Metroid game for so long, 13 years to be precise, and now it's here for the Nintendo 3DS. And guess what? Nintendo sent me a copy of the game to try out, and after playing with it, I came to a conclusion.
Gonna have to make a video on this one. Yes, sir.
But I didn't just want to cover the 3DS title. Samus Returns happens to be a reimagining of Metroid 2, so I figured, why not both? So on this episode of Beta64, I'm going to discuss the dev story of both Metroid 2 and Metroid Samus Returns. So since Samus Returns is a reimagining of Metroid 2, why don't we start off by talking about that original Game Boy classic. To begin, Metroid 2 was produced by Gunpei Yokoi and was developed by Nintendo R&D 1, both of which had previously worked on the original Metroid for the NES. This sequel to the 1986 classic was meant to be the next big thing for handheld gaming, with graphics that were on par with what was possible on the NES, a major feat at the time. Metroid 2 was also meant to improve over the original game, with enhancements like the ability for Samus to fire and crouch at the same time, and being able to fire directly below her while in mid-air. Plus, this sequel was also going to introduce a mystical new technology to the series called saving, something that wasn't in the original game. Because Metroid 2 was being released on the Game Boy though, there were going to have to be a few changes to make due to those technical limitations just lovingly provided by the system. Like, its lack of color. That specific limitation required the designers to change Samus' suit, because they needed a way to differentiate her power suit from her Varia suit. Hope I said that right. After all, the first game used a change in color to differentiate the suits, but that was obviously out of the picture now. Instead, for this new game, they decided to make the differences rest in the suit's designs. So they remodeled the power suit to look like this, and then added some of these big shoulder pads onto the Varia suit. Oh, and by the way, these changes made for the Game Boy release have been the same for every single Metroid game since. Isn't it amazing how a limitation like a lack of color spawned a change that was found in literally every single game in the series that followed for over 25 years? Interesting fact about color, by the way. The same team who made this game also worked on developing the Game Boy Color system, obviously the Game Boy's successor. That team, while developing the system, added in a special Metroid palette directly into it, specifically designed to make Metroid 2 look the way they've always wanted it, i.e., beautiful. Roughly 6 years after the game released in April of 1998, a German magazine by the name of Club Nintendo printed a story about an upcoming game called Metroid 2 DX. And as we know now, that never came to be. Basically, much like Link's Awakening DX, it was going to be a Game Boy Color port of Metroid 2, but we literally know nothing else about this supposedly planned port. That magazine did show a screenshot of the game though, showing off a room that was never in the final Game Boy release. However, there is a dispute about this screenshot, with many believing it to be simply a mock-up created with random tiles. So honestly, we can't say for sure if this really is a screenshot from this unknown, scrapped port of Metroid 2. Before we move on to present day, let's talk about some unused findings within Metroid 2. As far as unused graphics are concerned, there's two sprites that never saw their way onto the playfield. The first is an alien statue, which actually can be found in 3 different places within the ROM, and there's also an unused tile for an alternate version of the save point sprite that can also be found within the game. Now on to something extremely interesting about Metroid 2. About a year and a half ago, a YouTuber by the name of Ravenworks uploaded a video showing something mysterious. In the second room of the game, a couple steps down here, you can hear some really strange sounds. It's definitely not part of the music, so what's making that noise? Well, to answer that question, we've got to break a boundary first.
Hey, what's up, Mr. Beta64?
Ah, she says. Well, perfect timing, I guess. You're an expert YouTuber all about breaking boundaries, right? So would you mind giving me a hand here?
Yeah, no problem. See, if you go below the stage here, thanks to Ravenworks ROM edit, you can see that there's actually 3 rock icicle enemies. Well, I guess you can't really see. Their sprites are a jumbled up mess down there.
Yeah, turns out that room isn't even designed to load those enemy sprites, which makes it an even bigger mystery as to why they're there.
Well, maybe the room was originally supposed to be larger and include the enemy graphics set. Maybe they just forgot to get rid of them after shrinking the room.
Maybe, but I don't really think we'll know for sure until we talk to someone on the team. Huh. I was kind of hoping someone from the team would just pop in like you did, she says.
Yeah, well, you know, they're not breaking the boundaries of YouTube like me, so they don't have the power.
True dat.
All right, man, I'm gonna go back and break some boundaries on my own show, so I'll talk to you again on Saturday when we do the Game Club podcast. Thanks, dude.
TTYL, man. See you later. You know, speaking of Samus Returns, let's start getting on to that now. Development of Samus Returns began in 2015 under the codename Matadora and was being developed by both Nintendo EAD and Mercury System, the latter of which had actually pitched a different Metroid title earlier that same year. Turns out that other title was going to be a first-person game with 7 playable bounty hunters, including Samus herself. The player would find themselves on a post-apocalyptic sci-fi world, basically nothing new, fighting strange creatures on both the Wii U and a companion game on the Nintendo 3DS. At that time, Mercury System was actually pretty confident that their game pitch was going to be accepted, and even mentioned it to prospective employees to get them interested in working for the company. But Nintendo had a different plan in mind, so they straight up rejected it. When asked in 2016 about their prototype, Mercury System denied it ever existing, despite clear evidence saying that it did. But I'm sure you're wondering, whatever happened to that prototype? Well, shortly after a rumor started circulating about the pitch being denied, Mercury System updated their official website to show some man in a cockpit smoking a cigar, with some text saying, "Exploring new worlds, fighting strange new creatures, discovering new heroes. Expect news soon." It's very possible that this was their backup plan in case Nintendo rejected their prototype, like they did. That game they teased eventually became Raiders of the Broken Planet, a third-person online action adventure for PC, PS4, and Xbox One. Whether these two games are one and the same is unknown at this point, but as I said, it's entirely possible. Believe it or not, this actually isn't the first time that something like this has happened. It's the second. Next Level Games had also pitched a new Metroid game years before, which Nintendo was actually on board to create. Heck, we've even got concept art for it that you can see here, with an entirely new art style. But lo and behold, the development of this game had to be shelved to focus on something completely different. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, which Next Level Games also eventually developed. The team did eventually get to make a new Metroid game though, Federation Force. Moving focus back to Mercury System's failed pitch, it turns out not all hope was lost for the team. Yes, Nintendo did reject the pitch, but something about the team caught Yoshio Sakamoto's eye, who happened to become the leader of the Samus Returns project. The team had mentioned while they were pitching it up that they would love to remake Metroid Fusion, and while impressed, Sakamoto told the team that remaking that Game Boy Advance title wasn't possible. However, he was interested in remaking another Metroid title, Metroid 2. After all, fans were very, vocal about their desire for a new Metroid game in 2D, and since he wasn't involved in Metroid 2's production, he thought it would be an interesting game to tackle. So he asked Mercury System if they would be interested in collaborating with them to create what eventually would become Samus Returns. And you bet they jumped at the chance to work with him and the rest of the Nintendo team. With this remake, Sakamoto wanted to avoid changing any of the core gameplay without a good reason to. Smart man. So most of their changes were just additions to the original game concept. Things like free aiming for more precise shooting, and Samus's new counterattack move, which was actually an idea from the Mercury System team, and was based on their previous game, Castlevania, Lord of Shadows, Mirror of Fate, which had a similar parry-like move. Adding this seemingly small ability to Samus actually gave players an entirely new way to play, where instead of being forced to stay back and dodge enemy attacks while firing from a distance, they were now able to get up close and personal with those foes, maybe even take them out to dinner if they want, I don't know. And both of these choices were perfectly alright and completely up to the player. Of all the changes made from the original Metroid 2 though, it's pretty obvious the biggest one was their switch from 2D to 3D. They did this to include a larger variety of animations to the game's characters, and also make some pretty freaking cool cutscenes. Oh man, go Samus! Woo! Oh, did you see that? Did you see that? Oh, there she goes. Is that possible? Is that possible? Oh, hey. So that was the development of Metroid 2 and Metroid Samus Returns. Thanks. Hey, huge thanks, okay? Huge thanks to She Says. She Says, good pal She Says of mine. Does the show Boundary Break. You've probably seen it. He's basically a famous YouTuber now. Check out that if you haven't. If you're one of the few people who haven't seen it. And not to mention his new show, Sequence Break. That's a new one. Check that out if you haven't seen it already. Link is in the description. Do it. If you don't, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Patrons, thank you for being a patron. Your names have been scrolling on the bottom, or however I set that up. I honestly can't remember. I'll figure it out in post. But thank you guys. Honestly, you're crazy great. Crazy incredible. I love chatting with you guys in Discord. And speaking of which, if you want to join Discord too, you don't have to be a patron to join. Just join. Discord.gg/Beta64, link in the description. Now, little secrets. There's probably going to be a new series coming up soon. Probably in October, September, October. So probably expect maybe a new series coming soon. And expect maybe a video about a game I've been working on for 7 months now. A little reveal thing. If you follow on Twitter, you'll know what I'm talking about. So, are you ready? Are you ready for the secrets to be revealed? Well, I am, but I'm gonna go now because the video is over and I wanna play some more Metroid. Yes, Samus. Bring it, you beat them. You just get that Metroid.